Okay, today I'm going to be walking you through the steps of how to start your Adobe Photoshop um, digital photography transformation. The program that we are going to be working with is the Adobe Photoshop, and you should be able to find this down in the dock at the bottom of your computer screen. If by chance it isn't in the dock, if you click the launch pad, you will be able to scroll through the icons and locate the Adobe Photoshop button. Now, the first thing we want to do once we have Photoshop running is we're going to go up to File and New because we want to create a new document. For the purposes of our project, we're going to be working with a 5" by 7" image. And when you first load your new document, it might be reading pixels instead of inches. Adobe Photoshop is all about pixels, and so it's really important to get your sizing correct, because if you don't set up your document correctly and you go to stretch some of your images, they're going to look very pixelated and distorted because it's a pixel-based program, unlike Adobe Illustrator, which is vector-based. Anyhow, so I'm going to go ahead and switch this back to inches, and it's up to you which direction you want them to go. I'm going to start with a vertical image. You want to make sure that you change the resolution to 300 pixels per inch. Web base might be the default, which would be 72. So we want to make sure that we have that set to 300. And I like to keep a transparent background instead of a white background. So I'm going to go ahead and switch that, and I can even title this Surreal Photo Manipulation. So that's going to be the name of my document, and I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. So it's created my document here. You'll notice that there's a tab up here that has the name. As I open different documents, additional tabs will show up here. On the side here, you will see your toolbar. This has lots of different tools that you'll be using. And then one of the other important things to be aware of is your layer palette over here. We're going to really be working with that a lot today as well. So the first thing that I want to clarify for you is that layers are transparent workspaces that stack one above the other, and what this creates is like a stack of papers, and you can edit each individual layer and not affect the other layers. So this is what we are going to be working with a lot today, is the layer palette. So the first thing I want to do is I want to go in and I'm going to place my first image, and I've already saved mine to my desktop. You will want to watch the tutorial on how to do that. And so I find my original image, which I called Deterioration from Jerome, Arizona. This was a ghost town that I visited. And so I placed my first image, and I want this to fill my workspace. So I'm going to go up to Edit, Transform, and I'm going to Scale. The shortcut for this would be to press Command T. Will also give you the transform tool. And if you take your arrows and go up to the corner, you can drag your image to make it fill the workspace. When you're done adjusting the size of the image, now I don't want to lose too much of my image, then I can double click and it will set my scale. So now when I touch my image and drag, it's actually going to move the image versus changing the size of the image. Okay, so now that I have placed my background image that I want to use, I'm going to add an image that I want to integrate to make this feel unusual. So for the purpose of my project, I've selected a caterpillar photograph, and what I'm going to do, it is just going to place it down onto my page, and then again if I double click it will set it in place. And since I use the place command, it's automatically creating a second layer for me. So I can go ahead and click the eye next to the first layer, and that will hide my background layer and let me focus on my layer that I'm going to cut out. So I'm going to cut this caterpillar out, and I'm going to zoom in. Woo, too far. I'm going to zoom in using the magnifying glass tool, and you'll have to excuse me, this is a slightly different version than what I worked with before. So I've zoomed in now using the magnifying glass here. And another way to quickly switch, there's lots of quick commands between them. So you'll notice that I'm switching between my magnifying glass and my hand to move this around. The way I'm doing that is just by hitting the space bar. Will give me the hand so that I can move and adjust it. So I've zoomed in. Now I want to pick the magnetic lasso tool. And when you first open up Photoshop, usually I think the default tool that you will see is the lasso tool. We want the magnetic lasso tool because it will try and detect the edges and stick the line that we're using to outline this with, which we call a path. And the purpose of this path is to create a mask that will only let us see what is inside of the path. So I know that's a little confusing, but if you just watch, it'll make more sense. So I go ahead and click on the edge of my caterpillar, and now I'm falling around very slowly around the edge of the caterpillar. And I'm just tracing. I'm using my mouse to trace around the outside edge, and I'm trying to stick as close to it. And because this has the magnet setting, it tries to detect that edge in between the two shapes. Now what you might notice is if it's too similar, like here, it didn't detect the edge, and that's okay, we can come back in and touch that up. So if it's wanting to snap further out, you can always just click to add a point on the path. And then we just continue to go around the edge of the object we want to cut out. Now when I reach my original starting point, you'll notice that a small circle forms next to the magnetic lasso icon. That means it's asking you, do you want to close your path? You can click if that is showing, or you can double click to close the path. Oops. And so now you're going to see the little marching ants around the object. That's saying that we have that object selected. Now you'll notice over here I got some of my background, so now I need to clean up my path just a little bit. And the way we can do this is by clicking below your black and white squares. These are your color squares. There should be a square, or a rectangle, excuse me, with a circle in it. So I'm going to click on that, and anything that is in color right now is what is within our path, and anything in red is what will not be included in our mask. So you'll notice there are a few areas. Oops. I want to zoom in a little bit. I'm going to grab my eraser tool, and the color that's on top depends on whether it's going to add to my object or it's going to subtract from my object. So if I click it once, I can see that the white is the red. That means it's going to subtract that from my object, so that would no longer show. I don't want that, so I'm going to do a Command Z, which is undo, and I'm going to go ahead and flip-flop my colors, so that way I am adding these little areas here that I didn't get into my mask. Now my eraser is a little bit large, so I'm going to go up here and adjust the size up under the eraser size menu here. Might even make it a little bit smaller. So now when I go in, you'll notice these little bumps on the back of the caterpillar are now being included, and I can also kind of smooth out the edges if there's any sharp corners from where my mask was guessing where the edge of the object was. So I'm going to come back up here. I'm just going to adjust that little edge, and I like to go around the edge of my entire object just to make sure. So I switch by grabbing my space bar so I can move what I'm looking at. I let go of the space bar and it gives me back my eraser tool so I can clean up those edges. Like right here, I missed that foot of the caterpillar, or And you'll notice here I went a little bit too far, so then I can hit X, which will switch my colors, and then I can touch up that edge again. I want to hit X again so that I'm back to fixing and erasing the extra red. So in Adobe Creative Suites, there are a lot of quick commands by using the keys of your keyboard that can become very helpful the more that you use this to edit. So I'm just touching up these edges. It looks like, again, I took too much, so I'm going to hit X. I'm going to add a little bit more of that red back in. I'm going to hit X to go back to getting rid of the red. And this was part of my area over here that I was concerned about. So I want to make sure that I switch it now. I'm going to hit my X because I don't want this green part of the background showing up. Then I'm going to switch it back because I did get part of the caterpillar. And I'm just touching it up. And the more you're zoomed in, the more accurate you can be. For the purpose of this project, I think this will work for the amount that I need to zoom in. So I've gone around and I'm just going to fix that one spot. And now I'm happy with my quick mask. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom back out. And if I click the magnifying glass and then click the Option key, it'll let me zoom back out. Okay, so to get out of quick mask mode, I just need to click on that rectangle with the circle again, and it'll take me back to my selection. Okay, so to create my mask, I want to make sure I have my layer selected, and I'm going to come back over here to my layer palette, and I'm going to select the rectangle that has the circle in it. And what that's going to do is it's going to hide all of that layer that is outside of my path or my selection. So it hid everything outside of my caterpillar. So now that I have that, I'm going to click on Fit on Screen so I can see my whole image. I'm going to go ahead and turn on my background. Now we can see I have this caterpillar that's hanging out around this door, this rusty old door. So I'm going to think about how I want to place the caterpillar now in this space, and I can click on it. I want to make sure I have that layer selected, and I can click and move and drag it, and I'm going to actually rotate it. So I'm going to do the Command T to transform it, and I want it to look like it's crawling out of this window. So I'm going to go ahead and make it bigger. Now you want to be careful if you decide to make things bigger that it doesn't start to distort. If it's starting to look blurry, that means that you have maximized the amount of pixels you have and it's trying to fill those in, which makes it look kind of fuzzy. So I'm going to keep it about there. Now, to make it look like it's going through the door, I want to erase this part of my caterpillar. The great things about masks is that you can erase it on here from the mask, but you're not actually getting rid of your image at all. So at any point you could choose to turn the mask off, and I forgot how to do this. So I could hit Control and click on the mask, and I can disable the layer mask, and now I can see my entire image. So it's not that I deleted my green grass background, it's just that I'm hiding it from view. So I'm going to go ahead and enable my layer mask. Now I want to go ahead and erase part of this. So I'm going to click the link between my photo and my mask, and what that does is it lets me just select the mask. I'm going to click on my eraser, and I'm going to make my eraser a little bit bigger for this purpose, and I'm just going to start erasing the part of the caterpillar that I don't want to see. Okay, so I've gotten it to about that point. I'm going to go ahead and go around this edge here. Okay, and then I'm going to zoom in so I can really see what I'm doing. And I can even hit the X, and I can now I'm adding back in the area. So I want to go real close to that edge of the window. And then I'm going to hit the X again because I want to erase a little bit more right here for the edge of the window. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and go up to View, Fit on Screen, which will zoom out. So now I have my caterpillar coming through the window. I want to make sure that I relink that mask there. Now maybe I want to see a little bit of my caterpillar up above, so I can duplicate my layer. So if I grab my layer and drag it down to this folded piece of paper, it's going to make another copy of it. Okay, and then if I go up here, this is my selection tool, my arrow with my crosshairs. That lets me select my next layer. So this is my copy of my caterpillar layer. And for this one, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use my eraser tool, and I'm going to bring back, whoops, the end of my caterpillar. And I'm sure there's an easier way to do this. And I'm going to zoom back in, not that far. So I'm going to zoom back in, and this time I'm going to erase around the edge of the tail and just leave the tail because I want it to be peeking in the window up above the door. So it looks like it's this giant caterpillar. So as you begin to work with your images, just try out your images in different locations. Think about what you want showing. Now here's the cool thing about the eraser tool. I only have my top caterpillar selected, so if I go to erase over my second caterpillar, it won't erase. It's only erasing from the layer that I have selected. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of all of that. Okay, so this does need to be touched up a little bit. So again, I'm using my X to switch back and forth between modes to just touch up those edges. Okay, so I feel like that looks like a pretty good trim there. So I'm going to go ahead and lock my layer back together, and I'm going to do the fit on screen, and this time I'm going to transform just that layer to make it look like the tail of the caterpillar is sticking up here as well. So I'm going to go ahead and lock that into place, and I'm looking to see where it's connecting so it looks like it's part of the same caterpillar. So I like that there, so I'm going to double click and set it into place, and then I can even zoom back in up here. Ooh, not quite used to that zoom. I'm going to click back in up here, unlock my mask, and I'm just going to touch up the edge here so that it looks like it is in fact right against the door frame. And there are some other ways to be very exact when you're creating layer masks, but I just really want you to get kind of used to the program first before we get into too many details with it. So my final thing that I'm going to do, I want this caterpillar to feel like it's more part of the image. So I'm going to try some of my different layer blending modes. So in my layer palette, you'll see here that it says normal. That means it's just the image as is. But if you select some of these different ones, it'll change how the layers are reading together. So here it's reading the caterpillar as more transparent. So I can just go through and click on some of these and see if maybe there is a view that I find a little bit more interesting, or that makes it feel like it's more part of the original image, that it doesn't look like I just added it on. So sometimes by selecting some of these blending layers, it can help make it feel like the layers are together more. So I might choose something like this. So I'm going to remember hard light. I'm going to check out a few more. I tend to just go through the list. I kind of like that linear light, in fact. So I just click through. Okay, so I think I like the vivid light, was it? No. Linear? Yes, I like the linear. And if I wanted to apply that up here, I could go back to my top layer and also apply the linear mix, so it feels like this creature is crawling through. And I could also duplicate my bottom one if I wanted it to feel a little bit less transparent, a little bit more solid of a creature. I could do that by just duplicating the layer. It just makes it feel more solid. Now, another option, if I select a layer, you'll notice up here it says opacity. That's talking about transparency. You can also make it feel more like it's part of the photograph. If you reduce the transparent or the opacity, give it a little bit of transparency, it sometimes helps it feel like it's part of the image as well. Now you don't want to reduce it all the way or the image disappears, but that's another trick that you can do to kind of soften the edges and make it feel like it's part of the image. But I like it a little bit brighter to really get your attention. And then last but not least, make sure that you take a moment to save it. And you'll notice it's a PSD file. That means a Photoshop document. I haven't quite decided where I'm going to have you save it yet. Google Drive doesn't like Photoshop documents, so I'll probably have an Our folder on your desktop. If you click this arrow here, it'll show you different areas to save it. So I'm going to have you look for your Hours folder on the desktop, and then I'm going to have you add your name to the front. So I'm going to put my first initial and my last name, and then an underscore in the name of my document, and then I'm going to save it. Now you want to make sure that you save it as a PSD document, because what that's going to do is save our layers. So once I close out of it, if I wanted to come back in here and make some changes, I can still manipulate these things without them being one final image. And then to close the program, I can go to Quit Photoshop, and it'll quit out. It's asking me to make sure that I've saved it. Off the computer, if you go up to the Apple and go to Log Out, that will sign you off of the computer. So I hope this tutorial is helpful. Please ask me if you have any questions. I am more than happy to help you. Good luck.